Hello everyone, and today we start our lecture on text. Texts are something that teachers of English have to deal with on a daily basis, so it is very important to realize how texts live, how they are born, how they die, and how they're structured. First of all, let's look at the etymology of the word text itself, because sometimes the etymology of the word reveals to us the nature of the phenomenon or a thing. And the word text comes from the Latin word textus, which means fabric. For example, in this quotation by Quintilian, a famous Latin writer and speaker, it is mentioned like this: after you have chosen your words, they must be weaved together into a fine and delicate fabric. Therefore, it is no wonder that the word text has the same root as the word texture, which a fabric has. And as a fabric, it must be interwoven together, where the threads are crossed and then finally make a single unity. So the most common definition of text is that it is a sequence of sentences that display mutual dependence, formal and logical. If we look at this definition, we'll see something that will structure our lecture today. We're going to speak about these links, formal and logical, that keep this sequence of sentences together. We're going to look into the nature of this mutual dependence. Now let's look at two more definitions of text, one by David Crystal and the other one by Halliday, which, from the whole multitude of definitions of text, I think these ones are quite telling and revealing. So texts are language units which have a definable communicative function, characterized by such principles as cohesion, coherence, and informativeness. And another definition by Halliday and Hazen: text is any passage, spoken or written, of whatever length, that does form a unified whole. A text is a unit of language in use. It is not a grammatical unit, like a clause or a sentence, and it is not defined by its size. A text is best regarded as a semantic unit, a unit not of form, but of meaning. So we see that in this definition, Halliday highlights the second dimension of text, the coherence dimension, so the logical connections that exist between the constituent parts of the text. Although, of course, we cannot deal without the formal cohesion of the text too, either. There is a whole branch of linguistics which deals with texts, and it generally arose in the second half of the 20th century, and such names as Michael Halliday, Robert Alain de Beaugrand, Wolfgang Tressler, Tatiana Nikolaeva, Ilya Galperin, Vladimir Gak, they are all quite prominent in the sphere of text linguistics, which started to deal with the formal criteria of what a text is, but on and on this sphere of research developed in the direction of functionality, functional linguistics, and then finally into cognitive linguistics, to define what a text is, not only by its formal characteristics, but also, as Halliday said, by its semantic integrity. So let's look again at this definition, which I gave on the first slide, that a text is a sequence of sentences that display mutual dependence. And the ties that bind a text together are often referred to as cohesion. Cohesion from this Latin root meaning gluing together, cohesive. So let's look at this glue which holds a text together. There are several types of cohesive relations between words. We're going to look at each one of them. So these are the formal elements which hold the text together. The first type of cohesive elements are the conjunctive relations between words, between sentences. They are, we most often deal with them as with linking words. And this is especially important for teachers to keep in mind because, for example, in the state examination, this is something that we teach our students to recognize and to see these relations between the sentences. They are the explicit relations between what goes first and second by notions of contrast, result, and time. And I'm sure that you'll take time to further contemplate on these three notions of contrast, result, and time. But now I will just mention them. So, for example, first we'll go to the sea. So the word first implies that there will be something later, right? First, second, third. Lastly, there's the question of cost. Or, for example, such linking words as I left early. However, Jean stayed till the end. So in the first and in the second sentences, we deal with the conjunctive relations of order, whereas in the third sentence, we deal with the conjunctive relation of contrast. I left early, but by contrast, Jean stayed till the end. The second type of cohesive elements deal with co-reference and repetition. Co-reference and repetition. These are the features that cannot be semantically interpreted without referring to some other feature in the text. In other words, they are the elements which refer you to some other point in the text and therefore glue the text together. The two main types of relationships are recognized. They're anaphoric and cataphoric. Anaphoric are the elements which look back, so they refer you to some earlier segments of the text, whereas cataphoric elements refer you to some subsequent elements of the text. For example, several people approached. They seemed angry. So this they refers you to the earlier sentence. Listen to this. John's getting married. So this is a cataphoric element which refers you to some later point. I found a key. The key was old and rusty. In this case, this article the is an anaphoric co-referent item, which refers you to something which we know from the previous context, whereas the key, the word key, is also repeated and therefore keeps this locked together. Well, very often this co-reference is instrumented by elements of deixis, by pronouns especially. Then three more types of cohesive relations are the lexical relationships. They are such relationships where one lexical item enters into a structural relationship with another. So, for example, the flowers were lovely. She liked the tulips best. So the flowers and the tulips are related to each other as by relationships of hyponymy, where the flowers are is a more general term, whereas the tulips are a type of flowers, and so on and so forth. They could be synonyms or hyponyms or meronyms and such like elements. Then the fourth type of cohesive elements deal with comparison, because comparison always implies a link between the two elements. So that house was bad. This one is far worse. So as soon as we say worse, it refers us back to the word bad. We have to look for something bad, for something which is better than worse in the previous sentence. And finally, ellipsis. Ellipsis, the intentional or unintentional elision, that is, dropping of an element. For example, where did you see the car? in the street will not be able to understand the meaning of the sentence in the street unless we are referred to this elided element, see the car. Because, well, the full text would be, I saw the car in the street. However, even if we don't repeat this segment of the sentence, we can still get the idea of the second sentence by comparing it to the full one, to the full question. So once again, these are the five media, the five elements which tie the text together and enable text cohesion. They are the conjunctive relations, the linking words, co-reference and repetition, usually by deixis, by pronouns, and by repetition, but also by such things and categories as the definite article, for example. Then the lexical relationships. These are synonyms, antonyms, hyponyms, and meronyms. Comparison, where well, we have the two compared items, and ellipsis. Ellipsis, which is well, introduced in the later segment of the text and refers you and makes you look for the missing information in the previous segments of the text. So I hope by now we have a good idea of what cohesion is. However, as we said together, as I said at the beginning of the lecture, the text is held together by mutual dependencies of two various kinds, the formal ones and the logical ones. So let's look at this funny text, which is only held together by the formal relationships between the words. A week has 7 days. Every day I feed my cat. Cats have 4 legs. The cat is on the mat. Mat has 3 letters. As we see, this text does have the cohesive relationships. Almost in every sentence, this is repetition. So days, every day, cat, cats, the cat, mat, mat. So formally, it is a text. But is it? Well, apparently it is not, because it does have cohesion, but it doesn't have coherence. And this is the second term that we're going to look at today. This is the other type of linking elements which hold the text together. Coherence, well, means almost exactly the same as cohesion. However, it is the continuity of senses rather than formal characteristics. Continuity of senses, logic, something that makes a text meaningful. And this is something that Halliday highlighted when he said that a text is not only a formal unity, it's also a semantic unity. And this term is explored by Bourgrand and Dressler. So let's look at, well, I think it's clear what coherence is. This is the continuity of logic. Well, sometimes we most often notice that there must be coherence when it is not there. So when we see some incoherence, the text which doesn't, parts of which do not fit together, we can see that it falls apart, and therefore there is no coherence. This is a very good example from Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, where Alice is talking to the Hatter, and they have this dialogue. "Your hair wants cutting," said the Hatter. He had been looking at Alice for some time with great curiosity, and this was his first speech. "You should learn not to make personal remarks," Alice said with some severity. "It's very rude." So she was offended by the Hatter making a personal remark about her hair. The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on hearing this, but all he said was, "Why is a raven like their writing desk?" And this is, well, a stylistic device of non sequitur, of this logical incoherence, which is often exploited by writers, by poets, to stun the reader. But in this lecture, it is important for us that it shows us very well what a text must have. It must have coherence, whereas here it does not have it. So the first two sentences do have, the first two bullets do have coherence. The third is incoherent with either of them. However, well, the notion of coherence is deeper than that, because sometimes at face value, at first sight, we don't see the coherence between parts of the text. But it does not always mean that it is not there. Very often, this coherence runs deeper than just the surface value. So this is a good example from a book by Father Michael Alexa, a popular speaker in the American Orthodox Church who lived most of his life in Alaska. And in his book about small wonders that happened to him during his life, he tells a story of how he got married. He fell in love with a girl from the Yupik tribe. This is a Native American tribe which lives in Alaska. It's part of the Aleut tribes, and they are still Orthodox Christian and practice this faith, and this tradition runs back more than 100 years, when Russian missionaries, together with the Russian explorers and adventurers, came to Alaska and catechized the Aleut tribes. So he fell in love with a girl from that tribe, and he came to her father to ask him for permission to marry his daughter. He was not quite sure whether his father was going to grant this permission. So Father Michael Alexa brought a pair of wedding candles, so the candles that newlyweds hold during the wedding ceremony, and he just put them on the table. And it was like the first remark in his text. So he was asking for permission to marry Adam's daughter. His future father-in-law's name was Adam, by asking him, by means of these wedding candles, would you allow me to marry your daughter? So Adam came in, saw the wedding candles, and immediately understood what the question was about. So he muttered, wedding candles. Then he sat next to Father Michael Alexa and started telling him a story from his life, from his youth, how he was drafted into the Alaska Territorial Guard during the Second World War. And Father Michael Alexa sat there wondering, why on earth is he telling me this story? How he became a soldier, he was in the Alaska Territorial Guard. And then during the story it emerged that they had some sort of test taken, a blood test, in which it turned out that he was not purely Yupik, that he had some blood admixture. So he was sort of Creole, half-blood. And he told him, Adam told Father Michael Alexa this story and just went away. And Father Michael Alexa sat there thinking, what did it mean? And he did understand. That was an indirect way of giving permission, of granting permission to Michael to marry Adam's daughter. Why? Because he said, by telling him this story, he said, if I am not purely Yupik, and there were obviously other people, probably white people, marrying somebody else, some of my ancestors in my line, then of course, how can I object to you marrying my daughter? So this is an interesting and intricate, very unobvious way of providing coherence. So sometimes we have to think to see the coherence in the text, rather than we see it on the surface. So coherence is deeper than that. Well, and we'll also, for the remaining part of this small segment of the lecture, we're going to look at the frequent types of text by instruments of cohesion. I think this is important for us, especially for teachers of English, to remember that there are several types of text, and we're going to deal with different types of text. But in this case, this classification of text is done on the basis of instruments of cohesion. So the different linking elements, the different other lexical relationships, deixes, and so on and so forth. They give us this classification of texts, which I think is quite useful when we look at the text and we need to define its type. It consists of these 5 types. So description, and descriptive texts can be recognized by linking elements such as, for example, the characteristics are such as looks like, consists of, for instance, most important. So you see, the linking elements are quite different. We will not always group them together like this, but it's curious that all of them point us in the direction of descriptive text. Then sequences. Well, there are lots of types of texts which belong to this type, and they are mostly recognized by such things as first, second, third, next, so conjunctive relations, right? Before, prior to, not long after, meanwhile, simultaneously, following, finally, at last, in the end. This is something that we prototypically mean by linking elements. Then the compare and contrast text, where we compare or contrast entities, differs from, similar to, in contrast, as well as, on the other hand, both, however, then comparison, best, fewest, tallest, and so on and so forth. Then cause and effect texts, where we are shown reasons why, reasons for, if, and then, therefore, because of, since, in order to, effects of, caused by, result, and so on. And finally, the problem and solution texts. The problem is, the dilemma is, the puzzle is, question, answer, because, since, this led to, the main difficulty, therefore, so that, if, then, thus. So these texts point us in the direction of, these elements point us in the direction of the problem and solution texts. So once again, description, sequence, compare, contrast, cause and effect, problem and solution. So this is something that we looked at in this segment of the lecture. These are the definitions of text, the categories of textual analysis, and the categories of texts as a notion, cohesion, coherence, and the types of text which are based on these categories.